Does preparing for retirement keep you up at night? Well, let us help. In our free ebook, 5 Essential Steps to a Well-Funded Retirement, you'll learn how to save, how to potentially make up for lost time, how to fight inflation, how to create investment strategies to help protect against recessions, and more. Get our free ebook now at TRADEway.com/retirement. That's TRADEway.com/retirement. Hey guys, I'm David Mitchell, founder and CEO of TRADEway. What if God Himself gave you a blueprint for how to handle your money? Well, the Bible is a practical book. Let's dive in and see what it has to say about wealth, about risk, about leverage, and about investing, and uncover how trading in the stock market can be a powerful tool for moving towards your biggest goals. We're so happy you're here. This is The Word on Investing.
Hey guys, this is Ben Mitchell, and today I'm going to be your host once again. It's always a blast to get to do this, and I'm looking forward to taking a dive into one of my favorite topics today. Of course, my hope is that it's going to benefit you guys moving forward as well. Now, the last time I was with y'all, we did a 2-part series on de-dollarization and how that process is currently in play among a number of the most powerful nations on Earth, as well as the potential consequences of that happening and how they could affect you as an individual. Well, today, kind of on the other side of that, I want to talk about why precious metals may be one of the best answers to something like that happening. I'm going to share with you guys what is, in my opinion, one of the key foundational pieces of why investing in precious metals can be such a powerful tool. But before I introduce the topic, I want to ask you guys a quick question. Why is it, do you think, that gold can be, and always has been, that great protector of wealth? Or rather, why is gold something that humans have always looked to when their civilization or their country or their empire is experiencing financial turmoil? Well, the answer, which is also our main topic of discussion for today, is that gold is full of something called intrinsic value. Now, before we get into this in more detail and even talk about some of the cases against what I'm going to be getting into today, let's first define what is intrinsic value. Well, the simple definition of intrinsic value is value belonging naturally to something, or essential value. Some of the synonyms for intrinsic are inherent, or natural, or innate. There's a philosophical definition as well, which is the intrinsic value of something is said to be the value that that thing has in itself, or for its own sake, or in its own right. So now that we've kind of defined it a little bit, some of you out there may be thinking, okay, I can get on board with the idea that gold has intrinsic value, that it has this natural, valuable property to it. But here's the thing, many people out there, whether it's bankers or just proponents of fiat currency in general, to economists, even conservative economists, believe that gold has no intrinsic value at all. But why would they believe that is the question. Well, the main reason is that at the end of the 19th century, an economist known as Carl Menger, who actually kind of brought forth the ideas that gave us the Austrian School of Economics, he brought forth a theory known as subjective value theory. And when that came out, which was very much around the idea of individualism and economics needing to be individualistic in its central focus and focus more on people and their demands and the things that they want to accomplish, and then, of course, extrapolate that on a broad scale rather than looking at the collective. All of these things were widely accepted at that time, and, of course, the Austrian School of Economics has been popular in numerous fields ever since. But when this theory of subjective value came out, people then assumed that that must negate the idea of intrinsic value, because the value of a thing is only worth as much as another man is going to pay for it. But the argument for subjective value versus intrinsic value is really where the common disagreement lies. Precious metals proponents will tout intrinsic value like it's a no-brainer, and others will counter with the subjective value argument. But the point of today's episode is not to only show y'all the power of the intrinsic value that is within gold, but to also harmonize these two fields of thought, because I don't believe that either one of them is mutually exclusive. And I'll explain why as we go along. But first, let's go back to intrinsic value for just a minute and lay the groundwork for why I sincerely believe it's one of the greatest foundations for investing in physical gold. Precious metals, they've been viewed as a source of monetary exchange really since the beginning of commerce, but that also includes pre-barter history. We're talking, you can go as far back as you can possibly imagine, and gold and silver were there. They've been unique in that they were mentioned at the time of Adam, which we're going to look at in just a second, in the time of Abraham as well, all throughout Bible times is a great measure of wealth. And you can look back in pieces of any historical documents of antiquity and see that the same has been true. It's been a common theme throughout human history. But I want to take a look at a particular passage in the Bible for a second to show you where some of this power lies, and that's in Genesis chapter 2. Starting at verse 10, it says, "And a river went out of Eden to water the garden, and from thence it was parted and became into four heads. The name of the first is Pison, in that which encompasseth the whole land of Havilah, where there is gold, and the gold of that land is good." Now, the word good here at the end of verse 12 is really the point of focus, because that Hebrew word, tov, can actually be translated as prosperity or wealth. Now, think about the reality for just a second of the fact that in the earliest pages of the Bible, prior to the fall of man, even perhaps long before mankind even needed to consider the concept of prosperity or of wealth, God put gold there and called it exactly that. Now, was that just a coincidence? Well, of course not. God, as we know, ordained the future. He knew that man would fall and had even already prepared the plan for saving fallen man. In Jesus' crucifixion, we learn in Revelation that the Lamb was slain before the foundation of the earth. And he also knew that his people would need an ideal medium of exchange and an instrument of wealth. So he put gold there. Now, gold in particular has intrinsic value by definition because its value, as we learned in that philosophical definition, is derived from nothing else before it. And not only that, God's word tells us that it has that natural innate value. He answers the question for us as to whether gold has that inherent value or not. It was the first physical thing mentioned before all other things that God said had value in the sense of wealth. Now, the value of other things throughout the rest of human history was then derived from the value of gold backing it. We're familiar with gold standards and things of that sort. Gold has unchangeable natural properties. And go figure, they meet all of the properties of money. And when I say that, I'm talking about the properties of money that have been commonly accepted, whether you're talking about the field of anthropology, archaeology, history. All of these fields of study agree that money has to have some common properties in order for it to be universally accepted. And gold, in its natural properties, meet all of them. What that means is that the requirements for sound money and the natural properties of gold correlate perfectly. So, biblical authority, that gold has intrinsic value, philosophical argument and definitions of intrinsic value through the ages, historical usage and acceptance of gold, its natural properties, and the fact that it retains value all contribute to the idea here that gold does have intrinsic value. Now, in addition to that, let me give you guys what some of those natural properties of gold are and that correlation that I'm talking about. Well, number one, and this isn't all of them, by the way, just a few, but gold is divisible. It can be melted down. It can be formed into easily divisible formats that help with efficient trading, for example, in commerce. It's very durable. Gold is an element that can't corrode, it can't tarnish, it can't crack. So when it's converted from its natural state into some form of currency, it can be used as a source of long-term financial protection. It can be moved around without worry of damage, whether that be from the elements or poor storage or otherwise. And it's consistent. Every gram, every ounce of gold, regardless of its form factor, will always weigh the same and be just as pure. And for that reason, it can be a trusted source of payment because, again, it does not vary in value when broken into different shapes and forms. 1 ounce of gold will always be proportionally equal to another ounce of gold, and this actually removed an ancient issue that civilizations had when they were trying to figure out how to barter and what to use for trade. And they had to deal with a problem called the variable value problem. Well, when gold and silver entered the picture and pure money started circulating for the first time, it fixed that problem. Now, consider the needed properties of money. Well, number one, it's accepted globally. That has been true for gold. It's divisible, just like gold's natural property. Therein, it is durable. Money needs to be durable. Well, gold checks that box for sure, and it needs to be consistent. Again, gold checks that box. So gold is one of the few elements to occur in a natural state that also happens to meet all of those needed properties. It's found in the veins within the Earth's crust. We have about 2,500 tons of gold mined every year. And one of the many reasons that this metal is being produced in the first place is because it can transcend abstract value. At any given point, it could be a common measure that would eliminate another problem, which is known as the double incidence of once problem. Again, that goes back to ancient times when people were trying to figure out how on earth to trade with each other in a way that was consistent. Gold fixed that problem as well. Now, this can only be possible when the product is infused with intrinsic value. That's the only way you can have a natural element fix all of these issues. Now, for context, it's important to remember that every civilization throughout time used a metal as money, and because of that, the money was valued by its weight. The concept of what we might call nominal value, such as $10, for example, isn't all that old, relatively speaking. Money was measured by weight, which is a measure that's not all that manipulated. In fact, that's one of the very reasons it was used in that manner for so long. Now, let's go back to subjective value for a second, the argument of subjective value. The main force behind it is that the value of anything is only derived from what a person will pay for it or accept as a medium of exchange. Therefore, there is no intrinsic value. That's kind of a summary of the subjective value argument. Now, quickly, I just want to say that I do not disagree with the assertion that at any point, a thing, even when it's valued in dollars, is only worth what a person will pay for it. There are plenty of people out there, for example, right now, not willing to pay over $1,900 for a single ounce of gold as it's currently valued. The part that I disagree with is that because that's true, in other words, because subjective value can enter the equation, that it demands that intrinsic value can't be true also. So given that, here's how I believe you should be viewing these two concepts together. Number one, subjective value is what gives financial transactions a sense of humanity. The price negotiation, the commerce, the way that individuals interact with each other leading up to a purchase or sell of any kind, that is where subjective value comes into play. But number two, intrinsic value is what gives gold, in particular, a sense of transcendence outside of the bounds of man's manipulation. In other words, because of its innate, naturally occurring properties, gold is something that the human race at large will always gravitate toward when searching for a consistent store of true value. It's like a great reset button when times are tough or uncertain, or if actual financial collapses do happen, people turn to gold and often other precious metals as well. Why do they do that? It's because they know that gold has value, and that value is what we would call intrinsic value. Again, I don't disagree with Carl Menger or anyone else that would be a proponent of subjective value. I would agree that gold, as with anything else, will be partially measured by the subjective valuation of the person purchasing it or the person accepting it as payment for other goods. But this does not negate the reality that gold has properties and value that are without doubt desirable to the human race, and for good reason. It's that reality that can give you a sense of confidence knowing that your gold will retain its intrinsic value across time and that it can be used for trade or even simply just liquidating at any point, because gold is a very liquid asset. The foundation from which our confidence can rest, knowing that if something happens to our hard-earned money and that the full faith and credit of that money goes away, we can rely on something that has been used as a quote-unquote reset button many times before, and protect our families from that vulnerability of having the value of money rest in the hands of imperfect humans. That's what fiat money is. Instead, it can rest in the natural properties that were put there by God himself. Well, guys, I'm going to leave you with that for today, but just to summarize really quickly, gold does have intrinsic value. We can rest assured in that reality, not only from Scripture, but also from historical accounts, from documents from antiquity, from the fact that gold as a natural element has the properties that perfectly correlate with the needed properties of money. We can rest with confidence in those realities as we look to gold and even silver and other precious metals as a form of financial protection. That does not negate the reality that subjective value is always present. There will always be that human element to it when we are negotiating prices, figuring out how we want to trade with one another, or whatever it may be. But these two things, intrinsic value and subjective value, can live in harmony. Intrinsic value is where we can derive our confidence from, and subjective value is where skill sets come into play. The aspect of it where you need to learn how to negotiate, how to bargain, how to trade various assets, gold being one of them. And that is where TRADEway's precious metals education comes into play a great deal. So if you have any questions about that education, just let us know, and we'll be happy to help you out. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. If you want to learn more about TRADEway's approach to precious metals investing, you can actually reach out to me personally anytime by emailing preciousmetals@tradeway.com. That's precious metals, all one word, at tradeway.com. Of course, you can go to tradeway.com anytime as well, and I'm more than happy to address your questions and your goals. Thank you guys so much for listening today. Don't forget to rate and review our podcast wherever you're listening from. It really helps spread the word, and it means the world to us. This has been The Word on Investing, and until next time, guys, be blessed and happy trading.